Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Uh, s- Share screen na lang po. 15 po as ano po, 15. Okay. 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 Screen. Yan po, makita na po. Okay. So, see. Good morning to the panel and also to, to the University of Mindanao Research Office. So, achieving in life may bring us stress, but with our faith, we believe on such way to at ease. So, this study is about the mediating effect of spiritual attitude and involvement, the relationship between self-esteem and psychological well-being among Latin examinees. Okay, so I am your presenter, Leo Lester and TAO-TAO, Masters in Science of Psychology under the Clinical Psychology. So the problem is like this, taking a board examination as one of our pinnacles in our life. But does self-esteem affects our psychological well-being, or our spiritual attitude and involvement affects our psychological well-being, or both of it? So with such study, despite the existing body of research, this study focused on spiritual attitude among the board examinee of let and the mediating as the mediating factors, and also with the self-esteem and the psychological well-being, as a few studies have been dealt with these components so far. And another research shows that self-esteem links to psychological well-being, but a less significant factor to spiritual attitude and involvement. As this study develops, it observes a thorough understanding of the relationship between the spiritual attitude and involvement to the level of self-esteem and psychological well-being as contributing factors as this problem and also this study progressed. So here are the presentations, okay, for the research objective of the study. So first is to measure the level of self-esteem of the respondents in terms of personal, social, family, and academic experience, or the professional experience. To assess the level of spiritual attitude and involvement in terms of the meaningfulness, trust, acceptance, caring for others, connectedness with nature, transcendence experience, and the spiritual activities. Third, to measure the level of psychological well-being of the respondents in terms of autonomy, environmental mastery, personal growth, positive relations, purpose in life, and self-acceptance. Fourth, to discover the significant relationship between the self-esteem and psychological well-being of the let examinees. Fifth, to find out which domain of the let examinees' self-esteem influenced their psychological well-being. Sixth, to determine the mediating effect of the let examinees' spiritual attitude and involvement on the relationship between their self-esteem and their psychological well-being. And seventh, or the last, to find out which domain of the let examinees' spiritual attitude and involvement best influences their self-esteem and their psychological well-being. Okay, for the conceptual framework. So there's a link of the variables. Okay, so here is the conceptual paradigm. So the independent variable will be the self-esteem, and the dependent variable will be the psychological well-being, and the mediating variable would be spiritual attitude and involvement. Now for the theoretical framework. So from the study of Lazarus, or from the theory of Lazarus as cognitive motivational relation. So as he provide information about emotion as the role of the cognition, and to some extent motivation, the ways in which meaning is produced, unconscious assessment, and the consequences of this way of thinking for lifespan growth are discussed. Okay, So what's with it? An individual is subjected to existence and the search for meaningful living and seeing in the world. And for the method, so the research design is determines the relationship between the let examinee's level of self-esteem and the let examinee's psychological well-being with the mediating variable of spiritual attitude and involvement. So this is a non-experimental and a quantitative study. And 294 are the respondents, and the instruments would be adapted from the Cooper-Smith Self-Esteem Adult 58-item version, also the RIPS Psychological Well-Being Scales of 42-item version, and the Spiritual Attitude and Involvement List Scale. So this will be describing the test instruments, the measurement of the variables, and its reliability rating. So for the data collection, so respondents were provided with questionnaires during their review sessions at the same time with the vacant time as provided with the consent of the review centers. But due to the restriction and guidance of IATF under the pandemic situation, e-forms is provided also like Google Form if not available to the respondents. The respondents were randomly picked and assigned by number by using the Rousel. And the statistical tool we'll be using here in the study would be mean, Pearson correlation coefficient, and the regressional analysis. So the ethics would be in this study. So inclusion criteria. So the respondents should be registered in the PRC board examination, and the exclusion are those who will not take the board examination for the past 2019 registered. And also the respondents may withdraw to the study. So the result was a positive significant with the relationship of self-esteem and psychological well-being. Also a significant result of interaction of the mediating variable of spiritual attitude and involvement towards the variables. So here is the tabular result. Table 2 for the level of spiritual attitude and involvement of the let examinees, and Table 3 for the level of psychological well-being of the let examinees, and Table 4 the descriptive statistic and correlation for the study of the variables, and Table 5 for the summary of the regression analysis. Also, this would be the overall result. So this is the mediation analysis for self-esteem as predictor of psychological well-being through spiritual attitude and involvement. So for the discussion, when the variables are entered into the model, their interaction was 12.3%. The variables that best defines the overall personal well-being of the respondents is professional experience, having a beta coefficient of 0.850 and a p-value of 0.021. This means that a decrease of 1 point of professional experience leads to an increase in the personal well-being by 0.850, and this is significant at 0.05. And another, when the variables are entered into the model, their interaction was 31.34%. The variables that best defines of the overall personal well-being of the respondents are overall self-esteem and overall self-sale, or the spiritual attitude and involvement, having a beta coefficient of 2.79 and 1.69 and a p-value of 0.006 and 0.00. This means that an increase of 1 point of overall self-esteem and overall sale leads to an increase in the personal well-being by 2.791 and 1.690 respectively. This is significant at 0.05. Then, interactions of the variables when mediated by sale showed a beta coefficient of negative 0.929, and this is significant at 0.05. This indicates that the mediation decreases the effect of the relationship by 0.9292. So for the conclusion, this would imply that spiritual attitude involvement slightly affects the relationship between self-esteem and psychological well-being. Possible explanation would be that individual self-esteem is slightly affected by spiritual attitude in times of stressful situation or life stressors, including related to achievement, which may provide them time to seek about divine experience or intervention, which affects the view of the world and the future, and in turn affects psychological well-being. So, another conclusion: the spiritual attitude supports previous assumption on the relationship between self-esteem and psychological well-being it was conducted, and evidence may connect to a possible variable related to cognitive triad, which may as a good measure to quantify spiritual attitude and involvement. This study may be applied in different contexts as it based to these research findings as well as implications related to the aforementioned variables. And also, based to the study, it doesn't mean that having a higher self-esteem may have a higher spiritual attitude for each individual. So it doesn't mean. But there is a link that if you have a higher level of spiritual attitude involvement, there is also possibility that, or it seems that uh, an individual could have a high psychological well-being. So for the recommendation, so research may expand the sample size of the study and explore other related variables such as hope, love, happiness, pessimism, and resilience that may play important roles to the well-being of individuals. And another, furthermore, it is also encouraged for future researchers to explore another samples from different settings, such as industries, rehabilitation centers, hospitals, and government agencies, and researches that would be conducted in the said setting would uncover other form of dynamics in relation to spiritual attitude and involvement to well-being in general. Another recommendation would be to fine-tune the methodology of the study. The researcher is also encouraged to pursue experimental in mixed method design. In the given methods, cause and effect can be derived from the results in triangulation and can be utilized as a method of analyzing both quantitative and qualitative data. And it may also provide or could be a good study if self-esteem and having a spiritual attitude involvement could also affect their let rating. So as foreseen to this study. Okay. And for the references of the study, here it is. And that's the end of my slide. Thank you. Yes po. Okay po. Okay. Okay. So problem po. Sige. Ito. Okay. Yes po. Yes po. From the study in the Iran po, there was a research, but not on the board exam, but rather in, I think it's a college entrance exam, and also, and also, but a link, but not in the link of self-esteem, but on the link of psychological well-being. Ay, actually, yes po, pero short lang kasi eh. Yung nilagay ko dito sa slide ko is just ano lang po, just a browse lang po. Opo, I see. Okay. Research. Yes po. Opo. As far as my references, yeah, uh, mm, as far as I ano po, sa mga references po na ano ko po, parang na parang na-patternize. Opo. The mediating effect. Okay. Um, oh, thank you po. Thank you, Ma'am Glenn. Okay po. For I use regression also stated by my statistician. This was used to test the significance influence of the spiritual attitude and involvement on the mediating variables that examines level of self-esteem and psychological well-being. So parang iano yung mga relationship, if there's a relationship po with this triad. Pearson are it's also to determine the subscales and the domain. So, ang kada variable kasi is merong domains po. Opo. Yes po. Wait, I didn't ano pa kasi yung ano, na-print ko kasi. Bali, ang validity kasi ng coefficient is, hindi ko pa kasi na ano na, so, kumbaga hindi ko na take note kung ano yung ano niya. But there is actually a validity on that sa ano sa as I have sent the ano po, the paper. Ay, sorry. Hindi ko lang kasi na ano, nakalimutan. Ah, okay. Hindi ko na memorize. Sige po. Noted, noted po. Noted. Sorry po. Thank you, thank you. I see, I understand. Noted po. Yes po, as ano po, as I've said sa mga validators din po, including you. Opo. Ano po, when it comes to self-esteem, I think around 2012 push yun siya. And then there is another version of it. And if sa ano naman psychological well-being under kay Rip, so it was on 2015, and ito po sa sale or the spiritual attitude involvement, it was in 2018, I think. Mm, okay. Okay. Mm, thank you. um Based for what I have seen on the table, and also somehow I interview some of the participants, although it is not already included because somehow uh, there would be, I think, yung mga na-interview ko lang, somehow ang views kasi nila is ano din kasi iba din kasi yung question. I think hindi siya adaptable sa situation natin, kumbaga. Parang gano'n. Okay, one of the question is that sa personal. So when it comes to personal kasi na question, there was a question that uh, if ano ba, are you satisfied with your life? Parang ganun na question. Tapos, kumbaga, somehow ang rating kasi, sorry. Somehow, they see it na parang ano bang klaseng satisfaction or parang general ba or ano ba or sa ilang fini-face. Okay, kasi nga ang self-esteem ng mga questions iba din kasi siya na pag iba yung ano yung tawag parang iba din kasi yung parang language or the context to it. Hmm. As ano lang, yes, yes, sir. As based from the result and also the views of the respondent, they ano kasi they see na kasi na they are already professional or kumbaga parang binivision na nila na they are professional and somehow majority of the respondents are already in the practice of teaching na. So I think that would be the focus to them. Yes po. As as I understand and also the studies result. Ay, okay. Sa spiritual attitude and involvement kasi po, this is not on the base of a sect. So more on general siya. So majority of the Filipinos are on the spiritual side and also at the same time nasa culture na din natin kasi na we entrust to God. Okay? So, and also the spiritual attitude and involvement, uh, when it comes sa mga questions niya, it was, ano ba, in general form, or for the majority talaga na, aspect. Yes po, yes po. Pero yung dito po sa PowerPoint, browse lang. I see, I see. Sa discussion po sa paper. Um, Based on the views also, and also to my personal account, um, when we have a high on spiritual, high on psychological well-being under the self-acceptance, there, yung bang, kumbaga, there would be a fulfillment, and also, when it comes to high on purpose in life and the self-acceptance, and also to the other domains, I see that the Filipinos or from this respondents group, they have other views on the psychological well-being. Important. So, as yes, yes. I learned something that ano ba, sa study na to that it doesn't mean that if you have high self-esteem, it doesn't mean that you have a higher spiritual attitude or the connectedness to the to God. And also at and also I see that somehow having a spiritual attitude and involvement, this could help you at ease and at the same time uh, it could be also to boost your psychological well-being. Okay? So, ang na-interest ko lang kasi is that yung bang pag okay ka with the Lord, you are okay also with your mind. Okay? As my point of view. of almost, almost. Mm. Yes po. Um, sorry, medyo choppy po yung ano, ano po yung question, Ma'am Glenn? Yeah. Um, as far as this study involved, or based sa ano, sa mga variables and also the result. So this would help me as a clinical practice soon, in a way that I would see views about the state of the client. Okay? So kung sa psychotherapy pa and also other approaches in counseling, uh, I could see kung ano yung parang evaluate ko muna kung saan siya mas hiyang or saan siya ipasok when it times of application na sa therapy. So for example, kung gusto niya about spiritual being, so doon siya pwedeng ipasukan ng ano ng psychospiritual approaches, and also and somehow uh, kung ano siya about kumbaga both self-esteem and spiritual, pwedeng i-apply yun siya sa ano psychotherapy nila as for the treatment. Bakit? Personal reason po kasi teacher din po kasi ako eh. So I think yun din ang gusto ko rin na ano ba na respondents. But later on this would be uh, kumbaga adjusted with other settings. And also uh, ito yung din yung na-approve ng ano ng panel last time. Mm. At saka hindi rin, yes, yes. Hindi rin siya gano'n ka ano din eh sa clinical side. I mean sa educational na mga settings. Kumbaga wala pa yung parang saan yung psychology na area sa educational settings. Yes po. I see. Noted, noted. Mm. Okay, okay. Noted po. Thank you, thank you. Thank you po. Thank you, Doc Glenn. Okay po. Ah, okay. Noted. Opo. Okay. Noted. I see. Iya, iya po. I see, I see. Yes po. Manusen. Iya. I see, I see. Studies, ideas. Yes po. Yes po. General Santos City po. But some of the respondents, yes po. Some of the respondents kasi po from not in General Santos but on the Region 12 side po. Kasi ang prioritize ko muna po yung mga nasa review center. So ang nasa review centers kasi ang halo-halo na kasi yung address nila. And also sa General Santos din po ang let examines na ano po na I mean yung area, testing area. Pero opo, sa yes po. Opo. Opo, opo, opo. Sa Jensan po, Jensan. Ay, sorry, sorry. What I mean, sir, yung mga review centers na nandito po sa Jensan, but yung mga, opo, yes po. Okay po. Alpha, opo. Yeah, yeah. Yes, yes. Sige, sige po. Hindi ko po nalagay. Hmm. I see, I see. Sige po. Noted, noted. I see, I see. Si, bra, ano kasi, preview lang. Yung sa PowerPoint ko po. But still, thank you po sa, ano po. Sige, sige. I see, I see. I see, I see. I see. Okay po. Noted. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you po, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you po. Yes po. Sige po. Thank you po, ma'am. Thank you, Doc, to, from the PS and also from, to Doc Rona. Thank you po. Bye po.